Hey guys, welcome back. This is Bimsy Codes, and in today's lesson we're going to be looking at implementing a basic user interface for our game. So to get started, let's add a canvas to our game scene. So we want to go up to Game Objects, UI, and add a canvas. Now what a canvas is it's essentially a 2D projection of user interface elements. So that can be text elements, buttons, whatever it is. Now we can actually change our render mode of the canvas between screen space overlay and world space. Now what this does is if we wanted to create some text above the player's head, we could create this canvas in world space and start moving it around, rotating it. It won't be fixed to the view of the camera's perspective. However, we want to keep this canvas in screen space overlay for now. For our user interface design, we want to have some text elements in the top left corner of our game here, and that'll just display the lives of our player and the score that he's accrued. So to do this, let's go over to Game Objects, User Interface, and add a text element. That'll add the text element to our canvas by default. Now we want to go ahead and rename this one to, let's say, Lives Text, just so it's clear to us, and let's also go ahead and rename our canvas to HUD, which stands for Heads Up Display. That's essentially the 2D display that's going to be sitting in front of the camera. So let's go and move this one into the top right, or top left rather. And you'll notice that this text element's actually quite blurry. So to change this, let's go and increase the font size of our text to maybe 100. And you'll notice that the text has sort of disappeared from this box, and that's because the size of our rect transform is too small to support the text. So let's just bump this up to 500. We don't really need to worry about these values overlapping other things on our user interface since our design is very simple for this game. So you'll notice that our text has now appeared, and we can go ahead and scale this one down to an appropriate size, and you'll notice that the text has become super crisp and easy to read. So I sort of want to keep that text quite big and bold there. I think it looks quite good. So I'm going to go ahead and also set our default text lives, and let's just make that 3 because that's the amount of lives we're going to have in our game. And then another thing we'd want to do is we can actually go over here in our rect transform and set the pivot point of our text and the position of our text relative to this heads-up display. Now this is important because when we play our game on different devices, it might scale differently on different devices, and we might end up having a strange output on a mobile phone, for instance, or if we're running it on a tablet or a laptop with a smaller screen. So if we set up the pivot points to scale based on the screen's orientation, it'll be way more flexible on other sort of devices. So let's go ahead and select the top left corner for the left pivot. Now if we hold Alt, we can set the position. So I want to set the position to the top left corner. And if we hold Shift, we'll set the pivot. So let's add that pivot now, and you'll see our text clipping to the top left straight away. Now I sort of want to move it down just a little bit so we're not right in the left-hand side there. And our alignments are correct. We just want to make sure those are looking good. And we can actually select any sort of font we want for this text to display in. So I'll go over that in a second. But first, let's duplicate this text element out by holding Control and pressing D to duplicate the game object. And now let's create the score text. One thing we need to do is also set this default text value of the score. So let's say score will be 0 by default, and then let's also move this one down a little bit so it doesn't overlap the other text element. I think that looks quite nice. And you'll notice here we've actually got these two text elements sort of the numbers. They're not really aligned with each other anymore because the lives and the score are separate values. So what I'm actually going to do is duplicate these two game objects again, and I'm going to create a lives amount text and a score amount text, and we're just going to align these up together so that they share the same X coordinate along the user interface. So let's make this 0. Let's remove the 0 from here. Oops, score. And we're going to remove the lives from here because these values are going to be dynamic and they're going to represent the player's lives and the player's score, so they need to change on the fly, these two amount variables here. And let's make sure they orient on the left-hand side of wherever the bounding box is, so that means this bounding box here. And we just want to copy the x-axes of this into here, and now they should be oriented together. and let's just move them over here. So because we're orienting them from the left-hand side, the alignment here, they'll actually expand out to the right. So they'll always stay aligned along this left position, which is what we want. Now I've actually gone and found a website for us to download a font from, so we can customize the fonts in our game. So let's jump into this website. Now it's called DaFonts, and with this website we can actually download whatever fonts we want, but a lot of them, again, aren't allowed to be used for commercial purposes, or you've got to buy a sample of the font itself if you want to release your game with their font. So I found this Pepper Sauce font, which looks quite good. And here you can see this font is for personal use only. So I'm going to actually download this one and get it into my game. I'll have the link in the description for you guys, but remember, don't use this commercially. So to start with, in my assets folder, I'm going to create a new fonts folder. So let's go create new, and let's name that one fonts. And now if I navigate to this folder here, I can actually go show in Explorer, and that'll open up the Explorer view of this fonts folder. Now I want to go to my downloads folder where I just downloaded Pepper Sauce. I'm going to extract this one, so extract all, and I'm just going to extract it straight into my downloads. And you'll see we have this true type font file, which is the font type we need, so that'll work for our game. So if we now go back to our fonts folder in our project directory, we can copy that one in, and if we go back into the Unity scene, we'll be able to see that TrueType font right there. Now let's select all of our text elements, and we should be able to just drag this one straight on. Now you see straight away our fonts have been updated, and that's looking way better already. So the final thing we want to do this lesson is create a win or lose panel in the center of our screen. So before we reset our game, we want to display that to the player. So let's go ahead and go to Game Object, UI, and let's create a panel. So this panel we want to sort of center in the center of our screen here. So let's make that width 500. I'm just going to run through this pretty quickly. 300, or let's make that 200 actually. Actually 150. That looks about right. So we're going to have our win message display here. So we're going to use the default background that Unity provides. Let's give it a nice shade of dark blue. I think I like that color. Make it fully non-transparent, and we're going to call this win message panel. And then inside this win message panel, we actually want to add a user interface text element. Now we're going to quickly select the same font that we had before. If you remember, we're going to increase our font size. Let's increase this to 500. So let's make this the same size as our win panel. So I think that was 500 and 150. That looks pretty good. You win. Let's make our message you win 2 exclamation marks. Actually, let's reduce this size to 100. And we're going to want to orient this text in the center of our win panel like that, so it's sort of aligned properly. And now let's call this win message, and I just want to give this also a color so it sort of pops. Let's just make that red. That looks pretty good. Now just for another little touch, I'm gonna add another panel in here, and actually I'm gonna duplicate the panel that I already had. So Control D if you remember, and let's delete that win message that's inside there. We're gonna want to put that win message underneath the duplicated one. So we're just gonna say panel background. So that's shorthand for background, and let's make this 130 by 460, let's say. Give it a different shade as well. So now we've sort of got that panel in the panel, and it's looking a bit better there. So yep, 470, I think that looks pretty good. So what's going to happen is when we win or lose the game, we're going to make this panel active. And then we're also going to set the text to either be you win or you lose. So let's get into that. I've actually decided to split this user interface tutorial into 2 parts, so I'll see you in the next episode.